morning to everyone, and thank you for organization of this very important both conference on the one hand and panel on the other hand. So speaking from what is going on the ground, I would say that what world has really to understand about Ukraine is that Ukrainians are very united in terms of their belief that Ukraine will win this war, and public opinion polls which we succeed to conduct even in the times of ongoing aggression against Ukraine prove that. 90% of Ukrainians right now believing that Ukraine will win this war and believe that Ukraine should not concede or surrender any inch of its territory. At the same time, it explains why we have all these, let's say, attempts to repel Russia's attacks in Donbas, and we are succeeding in that. So basically right now, the front line is still not stable, but we understand what is going on where. We need to understand that Russia has fully failed with its even one of the modest Russians goals to capture Donbas. They don't have any prospects to capture Donetsk region, and they have stuck completely along the front line, which they reached at the beginning of the summer. Moreover, Ukraine has returned the control over a very important Kharkiv region, started liberating the Luhansk region, which is my native region, for instance. And at the same time, we are conducting a bit slower, but still counteroffensive in Kherson region. It's a different from the rapid, efficient counterattack which Ukraine demonstrated to the whole world when it came to the Kharkiv region recently. But in Kherson, it's still very well-planned and sophisticated operation, moving even with, let's say, smaller steps, but moving forward. So when it comes to the price of the victory, it means that for Ukrainian side, we understand that the price will be high in terms of destruction, in terms of life of our people, but we don't see any other way to win this war, because the elimination of Ukrainian state, elimination of Ukrainian nation, we perceive it as a genocidal war against Ukraine. And even the severe attacks on critical infrastructure, I mean energy and power plants all over Ukraine, we perceive it as the attempt to make Ukrainian people freeze, to make Ukrainian people be deprived of basic needs, because not just schools or buildings will be without electricity in case these attacks are continued, but people in hospitals will be not served in a proper way, let's say. So we are considering it as a genocide, and both on practical and legal level, Ukraine has started already processing this issue. I mean, Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Justice are pushing this issue for international negotiations and for international institutions in order to make Russia be responsible for that. I mean, for establishing of international tribunals. When it comes to the basic interest of the sides, let's say, when for us, it's not just to liberate our territory, but to make Russia not be able to attack Ukraine in 1 year, in half of the year, of formal or not formal end of this very war. So it's very important to make Russia be not simply capable of another aggression. And that's why the ideas of so-called temporary or formal ceasefire, which are being more and more pushed by Russia since the mid of summer, and maybe we will talk about that later. Yes, we perceive it just as a threat to Ukraine. And I can elaborate later, yes, but basically what we see now, consolidation of Ukrainian society, support to authorities and to the army. This, I would say, this is maybe the first moment in Ukrainian history when there is a full consensus between NGOs, between society-wide public generally, and authorities about how Ukrainian policy should look like. Yeah. It's about repelling Russian attack and liberating Ukrainian territories, including Crimea and previously occupied part of the Donbas.
Thank you, Mariia. And starting with the perceptions of this war, which I think is also a very important question to discuss here in Belgrade today. One of sort of the centerpiece of Russia's narrative engineering has been to frame this war as a standoff between Russia and NATO, whereby Ukraine is only the collateral damage, and it's really because NATO has failed to meet Russia's legitimate interest that this war has come about. And this narrative has had some success, including here in Serbia, as we heard earlier. Mariia, I'd like to turn to you. How do you address some of these fundamental misperceptions about the war and its underpinnings?
I think it's very important because Russia doesn't actually create nothing new for any of the regions. It just manipulates with the same messages, just covering it a little bit differently when it comes to North Africa, to the Middle East, or to Western Europe. Because the main Russian narrative is that Russia is fighting not Ukraine but NATO, didn't appear just from the very beginning of the war. So let's remember that in February and even in March, Russia actually pushed the narrative that this is denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine and elimination of so-called Nazi government of Ukraine. And only when failed with this blitzkrieg against Ukrainian army and Ukrainian society, because we perceive it as like the war of Ukrainian people against aggressor, against imperialistic Russia's attempts to colonize Ukraine one more time. So it's not just about army fighting. When Russia failed, they sent another message that no, they couldn't fail to Ukraine. They couldn't be defeated by a regular army of Ukraine, which was underestimated both by Russia and our Western partners. That's why they created this narrative and put it on the first place that they're fighting NATO or they're fighting the whole West. Because when you're fighting the whole West and cannot win even Donbass, that's not such an embarrassing for Russian imperialistic, let's say, image. And that's why they push this message, and at the same time they're just playing with anti-American sentiments all over the world. I spent a couple of months in Qatar. What I found there, just Russian experts working for decades in the region, they send the same message as in Western Europe, but just using the Iraq case. In Balkans, they use their own specific let's say, NATO or the problems with American sentiments. In Germany, they also use the anti-American instruments, sending their experts saying publicly that America is like the leader of NATO, but you have to, to lead this organization equally because everyone should be equal. So basically, this is an attempt of Russia to justify what they are actually doing in Ukraine. Second important message, that Russia tries to justify but someone else's aggressive policy, mistakes, participation in some kind of wars or military interventions. They use that experience to justify their aggressive war against Ukraine. And what they're saying basically is, if someone else did something bad, I'm just hyperbolizing right now, in that or that country, why are we not allowed to do something bad towards Ukraine? But Ukraine is fighting for its territory, which is our sovereign territory, for its independence, and for international law. So it means that defending Ukrainian territorial integrity, any country around the world, just signifies they are in favor of the principle of territorial integrity, like it's stated, and it should be defended. It should be put just from theory of United Nations Charter into the practical area of public policy. And third important message when it comes to Russia narrative on international arena, Russia tries to show that Ukraine is completely in this war. It's not just a collateral damage coming to Ukraine, but it's about Ukraine being not able to make independent decisions like a puppet government of the West or so on. But if you will go a little bit deeper into the local context, you will understand that empire never recognize, until there are domestic changes within the country with imperialistic sentiments, they will never recognize the former part of this empire as something able and capable of independent decisions. And that's what we are fighting for. As I like to repeat, under certain circumstances, you can make people make political decisions. You can make politicians start some kind of negotiations or whatever, but you can never force the people and even the army to fight and fight effectively. And even the military experts, Mikhailo can say about this much better than I do, they now, I think, reassess the importance of motivations when it comes to the capabilities of the army to resist. Because what we are seeing on the ground, basically, that Ukrainian motivations of the same ordinary people who were mobilized voluntarily in the spring, and as a result of their own decision, they came to military conscription offices, and they were mobilized. Their motivation rules and drives their successes on the ground, while people mobilized in Russia doesn't understand what they're doing.
Mariia, let's talk now about the perceptions of Ukrainians of the war. I mean, you've already painted, I think, a picture with what you've said previously of a very determined nation, right? Ukrainians want to win the war. They want to regain all of the illegally occupied territories, as you mentioned. Just give us a bit, in 1 minute, a bit of insight into exactly where popular attitudes are on the war and the end of the war.
Ukrainians were not ready to compromise about Ukrainian territory even before February 24th. I have been dealing with Russian-Ukraine conflict since 2014, basically because I'm originally from the frontline areas in Luhansk region, so I have the emotional and personal motivation to start researching it as an expert. And during all these 8 years of war, when it came to assessing the compromises, whether Ukrainians were ready to sacrifice Crimea or 30% of the Donbas at that time in order to, let's say, solve the conflict with Russia. The answer was no, in different forms, but no. So no autonomy, no special status, no recognition of annexation of Crimea. That was with which kind of sentiments we entered this stage of large-scale invasion. And after February 24th, things became even less, people became even less ready to any kind of compromises about Ukrainian territory. That's very important. So now, the victory of Ukraine, so 72% are strongly believing that the victory of Ukraine should look like complete withdrawal of Russian forces from the entire Ukrainian territory. So it's very important to understand when someone tries to offer Ukrainians to sell out part of its territories, this decision under no circumstances can be legitimized by Ukrainian society. And you can never make a deal without understanding how this decision will be legitimized or not legitimized by the people on the ground. Moreover, 20% out of the 72, they state that besides of full withdrawal of Russian forces from the entire Ukrainian territory, Russian army generally has to be destructed, or some kind of destructive and disintegration processes within the Russian Federation itself should start in order that we will be able to say that this is the victory of Ukraine. That's very important. But withdrawal of Russian forces is like 100% priority number one. Crimea is not discussed. Donbas is not discussed. Before February 24, Ukrainians at least got used to coexist with partially occupied Donbas and Crimea. But after February 24, we understand that Crimea will always be a military base, because what Russia did, just militarized Crimea and made it a huge military basis on the border with continental part of Ukraine. So without liberation of Crimea, there will be no the end of this war. Another important point which makes me proud of, let's say, our research, which we conduct even in the times of the war, is that we find out that there is no, referring to the title of this conference, there is no request or demand for authoritarian tendencies or for the regime of the strong hand in Ukraine, even in the times of a large-scale invasion. What we see in August this year in face-to-face public opinion poll, nationwide and representative one in Ukraine, that the 65% of the people saying that choosing between strong strong hand regime like authoritarian regime and democracy, they are strongly supporting democracy. And the request for this kind of model of governing increased since last year, which was more calm, let's say. So people understand the value of democratic procedures, even if someone might think that in the times of the war, people were tending for rapid decisions without specific procedures, without democracy, and so on. And the last but not the least point is that when we asked people, again at the end of August this year, what social feelings do they have when they think about the future of Ukraine, 65% say that they have hope in a better future, 40% saying that they have optimism about Ukrainian future. And on the third place comes the anxiety about Ukrainian future with 30%. And when I compared this data with the last year data, I found out that the share of people having hope and optimism about Ukrainian future has risen by 10 up to 20% since last year. So it's about resilience, it's about belief in our own capabilities, and that's what drives Ukrainians to keep on fighting and push our Western partners to support Ukraine up to the full liberation of Ukrainian territory.
Right.